So I'm going to totally read something different this time than what I normally read. And it's because Joshua Home Safe Haven for LGBTQ Youth is officially open in San Bernardino County, and that is the reason why I started this research and this book in the first place. Well, sort of. And this particular poem is about this, the real reason why I started this book. And my second child is LGBTQ, gender nonconforming, and their father did not agree with this. And so after having to take my child to the hospital, I then started this outreach, and well, I had already had this outreach to help the homeless living on the streets. However, after that, I wanted to do more, and so I became a community health worker for San Bernardino County, and I trained for that, and it was to help homeless LGBTQ youth because they have the second highest suicide rate in the United States, and the first is Native Americans. And both were experienced sexual violence, and so after that I decided that I was going to go to college, and so I went to college, Pitzer College, and then I was asked to go to the University of Illinois to do work as a fellow, and this is why I do my work on sexual violence and the assimilation response of female-identified LGBTQ2, Indigenous, and Latina Americans. It's a long name. But it's because I did that research that I then did a performance art on sexual violence, and then I wrote this book, and it's to help youth heal. And now I use this book in workshops, and it's because of Joshua Home that I started all of this in the first place, and because of my second child. So this one's titled Why Toilet Paper. Canada's snow chasm streets clung to my boots and told me to stay. I felt safe for once. Yet I knew no one but the familiar kiss of the Arctic wind on my California cheeks. My black hair shone under a fluffy cap made of snowflakes. I opened my mouth and stuck out my tongue to feel the ice flakes melt in my warm mouth. I suddenly had thick braided pigtails and a Hulk pail in hand. I was 4 again. Then the flakes dissolved, my hair grew thin, and I had my leather backpack. Strangers greeted me, and we chatted about where we were from. For once, I was a stranger in a foreign place, rather than being a foreigner on the soil where I was born and raised. Everyone could tell I was a Latina here too, but now it wasn't good or bad. I belonged in a place I never belonged. Strangers told me I should stay and that I was beautiful. I stopped feeling beautiful, or really anything, the day my daughter sat at a large pressed wood table in her counselor's office with a grin. At least it looked like her. Suddenly, the earth began to quake and I was floating. Perhaps the sun's gravity pulled all its gases inward, and our universe was about to collapse in on us. Maybe the planets were about to spin out of order and fling into another galaxy. Now I would have to learn all new constellations and search for Polaris. My wife found a secret chart, several of them, in fact, although she would say it was me who left her. Maybe she was right. Maybe someone else tried me on like a coat. I don't really know, but a gale forced the doors to the room open, scattering out wreckage, and none of us returned home. My eyes were cracked like the windshield of a totaled car, while my daughter drifted deep into the woods, but many of her belongings sat in my garage in boxes marked Mercedes shit. And that's how I knew Mercedes wasn't coming back. So I gathered everything I could and cleaned up the mess. I practiced breathing until a tornado swooped me up from the mangled mess into her vortex, and I became more. Until I finally found myself giggling and lying in the snow, and La gave it a making snow angels on the ground of the street art exhibition toilet paper. Who knew that a month later I would spend weeks searching for toilet paper during a pandemic? That's the first time I read that one, sorry. Excuse me. All right. This one is moving air. And this one's like more so in search of my identity, because I am Nawa and Inuit and Liceno and Spanish, and from those people who also say that they're Spanish, like David was talking about. Some of them say they're Mexican, on the other side they're Spanish, but it turns out they're more Mexican than they thought, so that's great. Moving air. Cher mon cœur. I am an air sign. Born the year of the dragon, a free dragon, a fire dragon, to be exact, and a pitta in Ayurveda. What does all this mean? That I am a strong force of fire and air constantly moving, or I'll die? I don't know. I'm not even sure if I believe in any of this shit. I know that the heart chakra, the anahata, is air, and that when the wind begins whirling like the wings of a hummingbird, you are always near. I know that as we dance on textured streams of the aurora borealis under a clear violet sky invisible to our eyes, that our skin is the scent of red earth. As I pick at the ground, digging up my clay to prepare my gift in the solace to my hollowed Shavasana, I feel like I am safe in your arms. But when I birthed my ghost, the doctors held the diseased tissue in their hands, then announced its death, naming it endometriosis. And I was happy to never hold her in my arms. 2 years later, a healer put me on the table under an orange sun. She told me that I never mourned the loss of my uterus. I felt that was ridiculous. But the silent air became a breeze, and I saw white gold in my dreams as she placed her hands on my head. So I went home and wrote my uterus a letter. I received womb therapy several times, triggering the movement of memories streaming down my cheekbones after the healer's hands dug deep into my sunken well. The healers pulled out my ghost's remains and forced me to see my pain, then had me write myself a love letter. Those written words moved like the limbs of trees creaking and cracking in the wind. My ghost left me with the remnants of her nightmares and inhumed in the lining of my uterus. Though sometimes I wonder if all the pain I carry is even mine. Sometimes I wonder if the disease lives in my DNA. Maybe my ghosts are my ancestors searching for peace in the clay of my vessel, molding me from the inside out. Maybe I am coded like a monarch butterfly designed to follow the plan of her ancestors. But I wouldn't even know what that means, because all I have are these stories traveling from my superior vena cava. I am a code etched in a mitochondria going towards my destiny. I am the indigenous American without a community, separated from my cultures, unsure of where I belong. I don't know of my borderlands or speak the multiple languages of my people, like the new mestiza Gloria Anzaldúa traversed the empowerment of her indigeneity, the flex of her bilinguality, the beauty and the strength of her cunt. That doesn't mean I'm not a new mestiza. It means my indigenous Chicanx grandparents were beaten for speaking words of farmhands and chattel slaves and people that smelt of the red earth hidden in the calluses of their hands and feet. It means I had a great-grandmother who was enslaved and kept in a boxcar. I'm curious of the stories of the people before them, the ones who shared the myths of the earth. Sometimes I feel the air moving across the hairs of my arm, and I know the wind is whispering a truth. I don't know if my ancestors spoke to the wind. I don't know if they understood the language of a tree taught to them by saltwater fish like the yaki. I don't know if they had prophetic warnings of colonizers or art made with beads or seal skin. I don't know if they lived in ancient cities, teepees, or igloos. I know haplogroups C1b, QM3, and A2J1. Locations of origins, not culture or beliefs or tales of the winds speaking through the leaves. So I climb in the tree and listen for your story. Or maybe the wind is coming from my anahata, waiting to speak to other hearts, rambling in unintelligible garble, searching for the ones who speak its language. Maybe your anahata is the one whose winds know its song. I sometimes wonder if your heart aches when I question if anyone loves me. Perhaps there was never a question, only fear of not belonging on soil that was always my home. Maybe I feel abandoned, or at least I did before I sat near the cornfields, listening to the cicada scream while watching the flicker of glowing insects rising up from the lush green grass. Maybe as I sat in solitude, peeling the rind from my orange, watching the specks of juice butter into the air, filling up the room with its aroma, and watching the juice drip from my knuckles onto the pressed wood. Maybe I finally left my need to research their pain and the why of the how I ended up in the hospital bed. I read words of Maya Angelou and cried about belonging. I cried about the double rainbow I saw crossing through the red canyons of the Hopi people after I dropped off my daughter somewhere deep in the woods across the country, far from all her people, but only 4 hours from my desk. I cried because the part of me that was connected to her is gone forever and she doesn't even know. I cried because part of me runs wildly trying to find her, searching for healing and belonging just as I do. Part of me wants to heal because she witnessed my suffering and can't look back, and I can't blame her. Then there is the wind of me who pushes out the memories and tells me to keep moving forward or I will die. I know now that as the wind, I belong everywhere and nowhere, over all landscapes, beyond the leaves of the trees and the curls of the hair of your hair. I belong every place, no place at all. So I fell in love with this vessel and carved the words into my limbs. When I look at my reflection, I see the woman who created me, women much stronger than I could ever be. I see women educated by the wind and by their abuelitas who taught them to knead masa and soak corn husks like mine taught me. I see the curls of my black hair, curves of my almond eyes, and the dip at the end of my nose, and I know that I am from more than California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Alaska. I am from everywhere and nowhere. I am from wherever I want to be. And finally, I will close with this poem. Just the one I always like to close with. Lunchbox message. The dawn of a sangha. Sometimes I want to lay in the wind to feel its arms wrapped around me again. Because sometimes I smell the aroma of you in the flowers and the trees. Sometimes I want to become the particles of the solar wind and wrap my rays around earth. Because sometimes my poems are dreams wrapped up in memories of you. Sometimes I want to be the flames of stars so someone will see me. I had hoped it was you. Because when I stood in the dark with my sister and son, I wished your hand were holding mine. Sometimes I want to whisper all my secrets to you. Then I remember that you are the wind, because you are always moving, and I am the great-granddaughter of the dawn. I am the sun, and I am the electrically charged particles of my dreams, and you are more than the wind or the earth. You are my friend who held me until my words became poems and letters became love messages on walls and paintings became nightscape dance floors within the aurora, and you became more than a love story in a book of my dreams. You became Sangha, and that is how this poem begins. Thank you.